Hello, friends. I'm Pete Smith. It's been a while, but this is still the First Church of Mars. I am inside today because we have a bit of a cold front coming through here in South Texas, and but it's good to be back. And I've still been going at it every day, doing my prayers, my meditation, reading scripture, as well as other books that refer to scripture or talk about finding God. Although he is not lost, we know that. We're the ones that are lost. But yeah, I like to read other literature, other books, and yeah, I've been continuing my daily practice. But I was in a show recently, and it took a lot of my time, a lot of my brain work. I had to memorize a lot of lines, and it went really well. So, excuse me. So I'm glad about that. But just to let you know, I haven't gone anywhere. Still here. And but I haven't had a chance to make any videos for the First Church of Mars. But here I am, and yeah, the show was good, and I'm in another show now, but with a smaller part, so I have a little bit of time. And today I've been reading this book. I had saw this guy on a YouTube interview. I'll show you the book here, and I thought, wow, what he said made so much sense. So I went to his website and I bought his book. Now, this is not his latest book, but it was the one that interested me most. His name is, what's his name? Neil Douglas hyphen Klotz. You can see it right down there, Neil Douglas hyphen Klotz, and it's called The Hidden Gospel. And what Mr. Klotz has done is he's studied the Aramaic language and the as far back as they can get with the original writings, and what he does is he takes what Jesus said and he puts it into a wider sort of vision. His translation is based on the original Aramaic, like I said, and Hebrew, and he makes a lot of good points. I feel more comfortable when I read scripture and I read what Jesus said. I tend to go by how it strikes me, in my heart. And but I think there's a necessity for me to realize that, now I don't know if you'll agree, but tell me if you do. You can always share in the comments. I love that. But what I feel is that we need to all be aware, number one, of the language, the translation. What happened? What was the original language? What did it mean? How was it translated? Now, I know there's like a lot of scholars out there who have translated many things, and many, theologians, and the current Bibles that we have, the translations, have all been, done by very smart people, very learned people that know languages, that have much more knowledge than I. But I'm not so sure that, it's important to understand or to remember for me that what was written about what Jesus said isn't what Jesus said. You know what I'm getting at? Like when he spoke, and what we read is what people remember him saying or wrote down what he was saying and then passed on. And when somebody's speaking, like I'm speaking right now, right? If I'm speaking and you're listening, or somebody's listening, and then they write down what I said, it's words, it's a condensation of sounds and words, and it's a tightening, a squeezing down like lemonade, like and putting it into a solid form. Whereas when you're speaking, it's not a solid form. There's feeling, there's, lots of pauses, and there's context, so we have to remember that Jesus walked on the earth. He spoke. He didn't write things down. He spoke, and he was telling stories, and we know how that goes, right? You know, the game of telephone, when you tell a story, or you tell a sentence and then you pass it, whisper it to the person next to you, and it goes down the line, and by the end of the line it's you can't even understand what was said. You know, it's completely different from what the original person said. And so I think that's really important to remember that when Jesus spoke, he spoke. He didn't write it down. So the writing of what he said is not what he said. It's a condensation. It's a whittling down of what he said, and sort of molded. And a lot of that gets interpreted by the person that's writing, and then the translations. It's a whole nother ballgame. You know, like we talk today, and there's many meanings. If we look at the words we use, there's so many of our words, especially in English, have so many different meanings and so many nuances and variations. And so, number one, it's important the context of words, of what it meant then, and what the situation was that the person that was speaking the words was in, that context. Where were they? Who were they talking to? What was it like? Were they speaking quietly in a small one-on-one or group situation, or were they speaking, you know, Jesus spoke to crowds, and as well as, you know, one-on-one and group conversations. So all these things matter in the translation and in the interpretation of what he said and what he meant. I guess what I'm getting at is I just don't go for the, when people say, this is what he said, this is exactly what he said and exactly what he meant. Because I just, you know, when you're listening to somebody speak, each person that's listening hears it a little bit differently, because they're hearing it through their own filter, right? They're hearing it through their own life, their own context. You know, they're giving those words that they're hearing their own context, how it feels to them, what it means to them. And everyone is different in that respect. We all hear things differently. We all interpret things differently. Even the same, you know, hearing the same thing, 10 different people will have 10 different interpretations of what was said. So I just don't believe that you can say, this is exactly what he meant. So I believe it's more about you read, and I do like to look at the different translations to see where there's similarities and where there may be some differences or nuances. And I think that's helpful in today's world. We have that access. I use Bible Hub, and I can take everything right at my fingertip and change to a different translation from a different Bible and see what they all said, and even compare them all, you know. And I really like that, because you'll see the similarities, and then you're like, well, if these, you know, 18 different, you know, translations all, you know, pretty much say around the same thing, then you can sort of get, yeah, that's what's going on here. But again, you still have to see how it sits with you. Like, how does what they're saying, what Jesus is saying, or what the writer wrote that Jesus said, how does that sit with you? How does that sit with you in your heart? So I appreciate this book very, very much, because it reminds me to open up a little bit. Like, think about that, you know, it's not as black and white as some people would think. Now, I do have problems with this. Don't get me wrong. This, Mr. Klotz, Neil Douglas Klotz, does go, for me, too far. It goes too far with, you know, stretching, like, well, the meaning could be this, it could be, and he takes a simple statement that is recorded as what Jesus says and says, well, but what if the word meant this and that and the other thing? And he really stretches it out like possibilities, which for me is also not good. It's not good to be strict with your interpretation, but it's also not good to be so wildly liberal with your interpretation that you can make it seem like it says whatever you want it to say. You know, that's not good either. And I think um, he does do that. Unfortunately, he makes it so wildly liberal. That's the best word I could say. You know, the meanings. He picks out meanings that are obscure, that are out of context, actually, with the situation, I believe, where Jesus was or who he was speaking to, and what words mean. You know, when you talk about words and somebody speaking words, it depends on what the situation is, what the context is. For example, he likes to use the context as blessed is ripe. Blessed is ripe. It means ripe, or good means ripe. And that's one of his big things, this word ripe, like a fruit, like ripe or unripe. So good would be ripe and unripe would be bad. Bad would be unripe. And at first it seemed like, yeah, that could be. But then I started thinking, wait a minute. He's applying the word good, like, and using fruit, you know, and putting the context in fruit. But Jesus wasn't talking about fruit. He was talking about our souls. He was talking about human beings and our souls. And for example, like take a strawberry, right? I could say, this strawberry is good. It's a good strawberry, right? It's red. It's ripe, okay? It's good. So in that sense, I can take the word good and make it mean ripe, right? Because it's a strawberry. It's ripe, it's red, it's juicy, it's good. This one's good. And this other strawberry, which is not ripe, it's maybe rotten, and you know, it's turned different colors, like dark, you know, purple, and it's really soft, and you know, it's it's not ripe. It's not good. It's not good. This strawberry is not good. So I can take the word good and make it mean ripe or unripe, right? But it's a strawberry. It's a strawberry, okay? You understand what I mean when I say it's good or it's not good, because I'm talking about a strawberry. So ripe, unripe, you understand? But you can't just like willy nilly say, well, it meant ripe for a strawberry, so good must mean, you know, ripe for like whether a person is good or bad, you know? No, it can't, you can't go that far with it, you know? Um, People are not strawberries. We're not fruit. Sometimes, yeah, you can sort of stretch meanings of words, and but it depends on the context. It depends on who, what, where, when. Who are you talking about? What are you talking about? That's the context. So that's where, if it's a word good, it means, you know, if he's saying like, well, man is good, it's good to love your neighbor, right? It's not good to murder people, right? You can't take that and put ripe in there, okay? You can't say, well, you know, the word could mean ripe, so um, it's, you know, it's ripe to it's ripe to love your neighbor, you know, it's ripe, and unripe, it's unripe to murder someone. I mean, you can't do it, you know. You know, in a situation like that, you're talking about, you know, good being a behavior, being a way of being of conscience, of good conscience, of good moral conscience, or good, you know, good action, right action, not whether it's ripe or not. Because when you start saying it's ripe, you're sort of saying like, well, in time, or maybe it's just doesn't have enough sunlight, or maybe it's, maybe it's hasn't been, it's been picked too soon, or no, these are, you're talking about man, you're talking about free will, and you can't just interchange any meaning of a word. Words do have many meanings, but you cannot interchange all of the different meanings at will. You must do it in context of the conversation, of the spoken word. So I think he goes too far. I could give you some examples here. And what happens is he will take a simple statement that Jesus made, and he'll turn it into like a 20 sentence statement that is so far from the original it could mean anything. And so then it gives people the idea that, well, Jesus could have meant this, and it's like, no, it's a simple statement. It's not, it's not so complicated. Let me see if I can find an example here. Okay, here's one. So he's talking about the first and the last. Okay, so he mentions Matthew 20:16. So the last shall be first, and the first last. For many be called, but few chosen. Now, granted, it's one that you do have to think about. It's not the most simple scripture, but his idea of what it could possibly mean is, here I'm quoting from his book, with nuances of Aramaic added, the two verses can read, so that which remains, the last to arrive, in the most ancient of days, the primordial before, and that which comes first, the knowing that's easy, may tarry in depth of understanding the all. The many get invited when life's circle opens. It is easy to join. The earth has been dug, and the pool is prepared, but the few arrive. Hemmed in by life's troubles, they can flow like water toward the gathering place. That's too much, Mr. Klotz. I'm sorry. That is too much. I'll give you another example. Here's one. Okay. This is translated from the King James Version, Mark 8, verses 35-36. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel's, the same shall save it. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? To me, it's pretty clear, that translation. I think it's pretty clear. Like, I can look at that and say, whosoever will save his life shall lose it. Yeah. Whosoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel's shall save it. That's pretty simple. Like, if you're willing to give your will to me, meaning Jesus, you'll be saved, and that's the right thing to do for your soul. But if you hold on to your life, hold on to it, and hold on to your ego and your will, you're not going to get the message. You're not going to get Jesus' help. You're not going to get his love, his mercy. You're shutting him out, and you're going to lose your life. You're going to lose your soul. And then if it ends with, what shall it profit a man? So how can it be good to do that? If you're keeping your will, and you're gaining riches in this world, and you're gaining power and everything, but you're losing your soul in the afterlife, and you're not connecting with Jesus, with God, with this higher being. You're just in your own little self. What good is that? So that's pretty simple. But his translation, and I quote again from his book, so this passage could also be read, Everyone who desires to give energy to his separate subconscious self will eventually find that self surrendered, extinguished in the only self. Everyone who surrenders her separate self the way I have done and hoped for will give energy to it. For what advantage do you have if your development in form exceeds all that the world can offer, but your soul remains incomplete? Well, that one actually, I have to give him some credit. That's really not that bad. Let me find another one. I mean, it's a little weird, but okay. Here's one that's really well known. He actually titles this paragraph "Simplicity Counts." So he's talking about the Beatitudes. Okay, we know the Beatitudes, right? This is from Matthew chapter 5, verse 10, from the King James Version. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Pretty simple statement, right? Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake. So the righteous get persecuted, and Jesus is saying, well, they're blessed. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. They have me. They have my love, my mercy, my strength. Let the world persecute them, but they have my strength, my love, Jesus is saying, right? But he translates it to this. So other translations of this beatitude could be, blessedly ripe are those who are banished for seeking justice, within and without. Their new home is a larger universe of empowerment. So, blessedly ripe? What does that mean? And then it goes on. In tune with the cosmos are those who are dominated and driven away because they long for a firm foundation of community. Their domain becomes the activity that rules the cosmos. So see again, he switches it to firm foundation of community. Well, it really wasn't about community. It was about Jesus saying the righteous. Anyway, then he goes on to say, happy and right on time are those who draw shame for their pursuit of peace between all the conflicting voices. They realize their part in the vision that vibrates through all of creation. So, between all the conflicting voices, happy and right on time are those who draw shame for their pursuit of peace between, well, okay, I could understand a little bit of that. So, well, you see what I'm getting at, right? You see what I'm getting at? It's just a little too much. So here, Mr. Klotz talks about John 3:16, King James Version. Kind of a famous scripture. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Now, his supposed translation, and he tells why here. I won't read that, but I'll just give you what he says the translation could be. And he says, quote, so another hearing based on the Aramaic text can be, for unity so loved diversity, all the worlds of form. Let me repeat that. For unity so loved diversity, all the worlds of form, that it brought you, a child of unity, fulfilled in all aspects of self, so that whoever would have the same confidence in their own fulfillment, like the earth underneath supporting all, would not fade with their form, but continue from world to world, with and in the ever-living life. That's a lot of change. That's a lot of change. Because basically, I mean, when you read the King James Version or any other, relatively well-known, or I don't want to say popular, but I mean, like I said, I do the Bible Hub thing, and I look at like 10, 15 different translations, and you all get the same thing. Like, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. That's pretty simple. He gave us Jesus in the flesh. That's whosoever believeth in him should not perish. That if you believe in Jesus, you will not perish, but have everlasting life. Everlasting life. That's pretty clear. So to take that and, you know, talk about so loved diversity, all the worlds of form, brought you a child of unity, uh, in the same confidence of their own fulfillment. Like he's turning it into like that you can do this without it doesn't say anything about God or you know his only begotten Son. um, it says, you know, confidence in their own fulfillment, like the earth underneath supporting all. It's not about the earth supporting anything really. Um, from world to world, you know, is he saying like reincarnate? You're just going to reincarnate every you know, every time you die, you're going to just reincarnate with and in the ever living life. So that life just goes on and on, and it's not that if you had confidence in your own fulfillment. So he just stretches. He stretches this stuff to a point that it's not only it's not only far away from the original meaning, but it kind of leaves it open for any interpretation.
Here's another one, a very famous scripture, John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. Seems pretty straightforward. Jesus is saying that the only way to the Father is through him. And yet, Mr. Klotz translates it as, the I am is the path, the sense of right direction, and the life force to travel it. Simple presence illuminates what's ahead, frees our choices, and connects us to nature's power. No one comes into rhythm with the breathing life of all, the sound and atmosphere that created the cosmos, except through the breathing sound and atmosphere of another embodied I connected to the ultimate I am. So, the I am is the path, not Jesus. That seems like a stretch.
It's not only far away from the original meaning, but it kind of leaves it open for any interpretation that you want. And he chooses some pretty radical interpretations. Now, I do have to say that the back of the book is filled with footnotes. You've got footnotes for every chapter. Many references to Aramaic words, and let's see. There's, I think, any place that anything is mentioned, it's got a full glossary, including the Aramaic translations of English words. It's got all the places where anything is referenced. Bibliography is quite extensive. Goes through biblical and religious studies that he's used, and all kinds of papers and cultural studies. Then he goes into the index to biblical passages, which is also very extensive. I do like that he uses the Gospel of Thomas. I think that's important to take a look at that. Then he's got a general index here that is just generally any word that you want to see where it's referenced to in his book. So it's a very extensive back of the book, so to speak. Well, and there he is. That doesn't look like him in the interview that I saw, but that's him. Anyway, I think I've given you my opinion, which is, it's just one person's opinion. This guy has studied translations, Aramaic, Hebrew. Is very, I imagine an extremely smart person. Has dedicated many, many years of his life to doing this, and I'm just a guy, that's I don't have the training or the schooling that this gentleman has had. So, but I must say that this book is really not for me, and that's just my 2 cents, So anyway, but I do appreciate the intention that I do agree we need to be open to more than just this is what it meant, like so rigid. Like I do believe that that's not, for me, that's not a good way to be in reading the scripture. I do have to remember that it was during a certain time, place, different languages, people writing things down from what somebody actually spoke, They spoke. They didn't write this down. The person didn't write it. Jesus didn't write it. He spoke it. It was kind of off the cuff, And all that goes in with listening to somebody speaking, all the little nuances you pick up, the behavior, the delivery, the tone, the context, and, trying to say so much in so few words, and having that all boiled down and then translated, from Aramaic or Hebrew to Greek, and then translated from there to possibly, another language, and possibly, and then eventually English, that a lot can happen in that process. So when we read the scripture, we have to be aware that, understand what it says, but also ask for the wisdom to understand as well, and also see what it feels like when you're reading it, what it means to you in your heart, in your heart. Anyway, well, this is a long video. If you're with me still on this video, I would say go ahead and subscribe. Hit the like button and subscribe, and look for my next little talk, my next little chat. I don't know, it might be soon, might be a while, but I'll keep it going. This is Pete Smith, up in my little cubbyhole loft here, because it's cold outside. First Church of Mars, saying so long. God bless.